leaps and bounds. Our criteria is that you must be chronically homeless, severe alcoholism, for whom no abstinence-based program has you been failed or refused. In other words, you have to try abstinence at one point in your life. But if those have failed, we'll put you into a managed alcohol program. So we started off with the WET program, and that was our early attempt at managed alcohol. It was in one of the shelters. It was about 20 beds, and we started to give alcohol to alcoholics, 1 drink an hour, with the thought that that might stabilize them. So this is the WET program in 2001. It was a low barrier program. It was to engage them, stabilize their alcoholism, provide them essential mental and physical health services, get them into our fold, make them one of us, and slowly then try to minimize the harm from the alcohol. But it's not an abstinence-based program. I'm going to explain it in a minute. However, something very funny happened to us. Around 2005, we were going in 2001, the first thing the guys came up to us, the guys and women, came up to us and said, "We want a mayor." I said, "You want a mayor? Why?" He said, "We don't like the decisions that you're making for us. You're too nice. We need some rules around this place." These are the guys are homeless. They live in anarchy most of the time. "Nope, we want a mayor." Then they said, "We want a garden." Then they said, "We want to meet our families. We want a dog. We want to cook for ourselves. We don't want all the stuff that you're doing for us." And so we bought a hotel. The name was the Cardinal Suites Hotel. It was nearby. Didn't like the name. It wasn't classy enough, so they called it the Oaks. So we started in 2010, and they all marched out to the Oaks. They took control of it. They wanted to have the rooms the way they were. They wanted to have the dining room the way it is. Now they have a wee machine, an exercise room. They still managed alcohol, still getting a drink an hour. But they were starting to take control of their lives. These were in veteran street alcoholics, the worst. We intentionally only take the worst. And they started to take control of their life. So that's the Oaks. I'm going to explain this in a minute. So you have to remember the difference between WET, now is our acute stabilization program. And then once stabilized, you move to transitional housing, the Oaks. Okay? I'm not going to go into this, but in 2006 we characterized our people. They're very much like you anticipated, adult male alcoholics. However, that population was changing. We're starting to see young girls, 21 years old, who are alcoholics. We're starting to see immigrants, or the elderly, that are alcoholics and homeless. We give them 1 drink an hour. I don't know how much you give, but it's 5 ounces for us of wine that they make themselves. We start at 7:30 in the morning, and we finish at 9:30 at night. And they can drink every hour, as long as they're not intoxicated or unruly. But if they are, they're cut off. And I can tell you, the worst thing that you can do at the Oaks is ever to cut somebody off, or threaten to send them back to the shelters if they don't behave. That is like death. We have client care workers, so those are individuals who are their family, the family that they don't have. They're the people who tell you that, in the morning, don't forget your medications. Did you clean your room? You have a medical appointment today. Can we help you get up there to that medical appointment? Sit down when you're told to sit down, things like that. That's your family. And in addition to that, we have doctors and nurses. We have an online medical record connected to the hospital. And this is our list of the WET shelter, the first one, acute that I told you, and then the chronic stabilization program, the Oaks. So you can see the type of support. I'm there as the administration. I provide health services. But to be honest with you, it runs very well with just me on the phone. I'm on call for them today. I'll get maybe 1 call, and it'll go just fine. So what about the drinking? Well, when we first, in 2006, looked at our acute WET shelter, you can see just the bottom line there. Consumption went from about 45 down to 8 alcohol equivalents per day. A dramatic reduction, about 1/8 of what they would normally be drinking on the streets. So was there harm reduction? Yes. And this, back in 2006, that was our outcomes. Successful treatment of a condition that was admitted according to Canadian standards, primary care, reduction of risk behaviors, appropriate use of now the hospital, and compliance with recommended treatment. And our goal was to try and provide care for these individuals that met the Canadian standards for the housed population. We thought that was a huge stretch. Well, this, I don't know about you and your environment, but this clearly exceeds Canadian standards. Our immunization rates in Canada are around 50%. You know, for influenza, 100% here. Screening for health, probably about 30% in Canada. Close to 100% in this population. So they're meeting their targets for health. But what happened to the police and to the emergency department? You can see in 2006 the rapid, dramatic reduction of contacts with the police. That's the one on your left. Its police is green and brown, but the before and after is left and right. So very substantive reduction. So they're not seeing the police anymore, and they're not going to the hospital. And when they go to the hospital, they go after we've called, we've notified them that the person has to be seen, we've arranged for them to be transported there, and arranged for them to have a sitter while they're there with them and bring them back. That results, for those people who are financially inclined, our economic analysis in 2006 showed that we actually save, net of our expenses, $3.5 million with this population every year. So it provides better care at a fraction of the price. So what's happened since then as we developed the Oaks? Was this sustainable? And do we still get the same results? So you can see where our people come from. Our ages now, if we looked at 127 of our individuals when we net out and add the Oaks and the wet together, you can see what their ages are, and you can see the sex and gender. Mental health, they're there for significant reasons for physical health. Looking for housing, well, the Oaks, because they're stabilizing now, that's why they're now starting to think about housing. In the wet shelter, they're just trying to stop drinking or slow down on their drinking. What's our costs? There you can see our costs in the wet and in the Oaks. And the alcohol, when compared to the two, you can see that there's a substantive drop. But still, that's a lot of alcohol. That's how many ounces of wine they're drinking in a day. So these people, even though we're trying to get them off their alcohol and encourage them to get lower and lower amounts, are still drinking about 2 bottles of alcohol, wine a day. That's a lot. I don't like it, and we continue to try and reduce it. And they're smoking, but in fact, that's an area that we've been able to reduce by about 50% the amount of smoking. What about the outcomes when we compare our acute wet shelter to our chronic? They came there because they were looking for housing. Look at that, 26% of the Oaks have now gone to be housed. I don't know of any other homeless program that you can get 26% of your population into a housed environment, especially when you take the absolute most refractory people coming in. They're transferred to other programs, and because they live at the Oaks, we've had 4 of them die there. Now, I'll just go through these things quickly. I'm not going to read them, but I did want to highlight a couple of things. They changed in their lifestyle. The people at the wet shelter are there to change their lifestyle. They're at the Oaks because that's where they would like to be and stay. So that's the difference there. Does the client participate in activities outside of our program? We want them at the Oaks to do other things. We want them to become essential members of the community, so they volunteer. They take ladies in our community of where the Oaks is and take them to doctor's appointments. These are chronic, refractory, outside alcoholics that you want to walk around when you see them on the street. They're now volunteering. They're fundraising. They're giving back to that community. So They also have days out. I live on a farm. They've come to my farm to cut a Christmas tree. They have a big Christmas party. They beat me at euchre all the time. They have family nights. There's a place called Ray's Reptile House that they all wanted to go as an outing to see, and they all packed in a van and went off to Ray's Reptile House. So at the same time, their self-care outcomes were dramatic, and I'm not going to go over those. Screening for infectious diseases, sustainable. That important changes that we saw in 2006, by 2013, still there. So we were getting the same health outcomes and social outcomes. We still have disruptive problems. There's no doubt about it. The people, when they come into the wet shelter, are wild and woolly. They're tough to control. And did they consume alcohol outside the program? You bet. And we said, you've been drinking outside. We cut them off. We reduced the amounts. And with time, they decrease. At the Oaks, they are drinking outside the program, but they're drinking now socially as a group. They go to the pub now. With a little bit of money that they have, they save up, and they have pub night. Did the consumption of the illness ever result in a problem at the wet shelter? Always. These guys are tough to control. Is there a reduction in the incidence of police and ambulance? And the wet, dramatic. By the Oaks at this point in time, they're stabilizing, so there's less of a response. And you don't have to look at this, but now we just characterized our police encounters. That's that second column along there. Number of encounters with the police, and then after they're in the program, just look at the numbers dropping. Huge reduction in the police contacts. And so our program now has grown. Our program is getting bigger and bigger. We're doing new and more things. And we could have a whole nother Oaks if we had the opportunity to do it. So I'm just going to end by telling you our next adventure. We have many people who are high users, they're alcoholics or drug addicted. They're coming to our emergency department. Our police are picking them up. They're going to the police station all the time, etc. So we've said that's bad use of resources, and it's not good for them as well. So now, when they're drunk and disorderly, or they're intoxicated on a stimulant or cocaine or whatever that might be, they come to us. And we look after them. We stabilize them. We put them to bed. And in the morning, we ask them, do you want to keep drinking? Do you want to go into a detox program? Do you want to go into a managed alcohol program? And we bring them in slowly into the process. So we've developed a program which is targeted engagement and diversion for those high users of our emergency and police services. About 120 people per year. So in conclusion then, I'll just say that managed alcohol is a strategy that reduces harm. It's effective, provides better care at less cost, more self-care, they take control of their lives. The outcomes are very gratifying. And is it sustainable? Well, 2006, all the way from 2001 to 2013, the program is growing and the outcomes are improving. So yes, it's sustainable. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. And I don't know if you're allowed to ask questions or.
Thank you very much for your inspiring speech. Before I will ask some questions and ask the audience if they have, I would like to invite you to watch the documentary on the Kleine Haag, so you have an impression on how we've interpreted your system in the Netherlands, and then I'm very curious what's your take on that. So, dames en heren, we gaan kijken naar de film, spannend. Dus ziet u mij daar in die opvang. Hier is Van de Straat.
Ja.
Als ik soms meteen om 7:30 een biertje neem, dan word ik wel rustig. Ga ik het werk doen.
Soms heb je 5 dagen dat je niks meemaakt, maar soms heb je 5 dagen achter elkaar dat agressie is en dan is het wel heel zwaar.
Er is nog zoveel moois buiten. Door alcohol bijvoorbeeld. Dan kun je ook zoveel verliezen. Denk daarover na.
Bier geven aan alcoholisten. Dat klinkt als wapens verstrekken aan criminelen. Toch gebeurt het al ruim 4 jaar in alcoholopvang de Kleine Haag in Amersfoort. Het idee, wie binnendrinkt, doet dat niet op straat. De komende 24 uur neem ik een kijkje in de opvang. Ik vraag me af of de methode werkt en of de overlast in Amersfoort inderdaad is afgenomen.
Hoe lang ben je hier al?
Al lang 3 jaar.
Na mijn ontmoeting met